Okay, welcome back everyone. I'm going to teach you this next topic of enlightenment. What is enlightenment? To be able to help you guys understand this mental state that the Buddha discovered. And essentially what it's going to do is help you be able to make your way to it. Because if you didn't know what enlightenment was, you would have a very difficult time making your way to it. So by understanding what it is, not only will you be able to navigate your way to it more readily, but once you get to enlightenment, you'll know that your mind is actually enlightened. So just like before, if you guys would like to ask any and all questions, you're more than welcome to. As we go through, I'm going to pause a couple different times, giving you guys an opportunity to ask any and all questions that you like. So the first thing I'll share on this topic about what enlightenment is helping you to understand that it's a challenge for the unenlightened mind to understand what enlightenment is. If you had never had chocolate ice cream before, and I sat here and described chocolate ice cream to you, you'd have a better understanding of what chocolate ice cream is after our conversation, but you wouldn't know 100% of what chocolate ice cream tastes like until you actually taste it yourself, right? So enlightenment is the same way. I can sit here and explain it to you all day long and helping you to understand what it is, but you're not going to fully understand what enlightenment is until your mind's starting to experience more and more qualities of it. At the end of our conversation, you're going to know more about what enlightenment is than you do right now. But just understand that at the end of our conversation, you're not going to understand it entirely 100%. But any questions you guys have, you're more than welcome to let me know. Essentially, enlightenment is the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha. Through developing the mind and training the mind, you can get to this enlightened mental state. So feel free to ask any and all questions that you like. So enlightenment is a mental state that is attained during this life or at death. By the time the mind gets to enlightenment, it'll be experiencing peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. This is a mental state that can be attained in this human realm, and it can also be attained in the heavenly realm. Now, as you guys heard me share that none of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, you can independently verify all his teachings, including the 5 realms. I don't teach those things here in this foundational program because the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence, why this is independently verifiable, usually when you're first getting started on the path, it's not something that you're approaching when you first get started. You might not have the wisdom of how to verify the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence, but just understand that that is possible. So an individual can gain the wisdom of how to independently verify that. And I have it in the book series. In volume 11, chapter 105, I show you how to independently verify these things. But just understand that this enlightened mental state, it can be attained in the human realm and in the heavenly realm. The other realms of hell, animal, and afflicted spirits, individual can't get to enlightenment in those realms. It would be the human realm that you'll be able to more readily make your way to enlightenment. And having gotten to enlightenment, not only is the mind peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, but you'll notice that it's unshakable, it's steady, it's not able to be shaken up. Your mind is constantly steady and stable. That the mind is relaxed and calm, but yet it's attentive and alert. Oftentimes we think about relaxed and calm, we think like, right, like this, but that's not the way an enlightened mind functions. There's relaxed, the mind is relaxed and calm, but yet it's attentive, it's alert, it's sharp, it's crisp. So this is what an individual is experiencing in the enlightened mental state, where there's no discontentedness whatsoever. And having gotten to enlightenment either during life or after death or at death, an individual won't experience rebirth, coming back into the world over and over and over again. Again, you can set this aside, the whole cycle of rebirth, because what's happened in the past is in the past. What's may or may not happen in the future is in the future, but just understand the Buddha did teach this, and there's certain reasons why he taught it, and you can independently verify it, but it's not typically something you do when you first get started. But talking about this topic of enlightenment, there's this understanding that you'll need to be able to have at some point. So the enlightened mental state, attaining it in this life, you'll experience that for the rest of this life. It's a permanent mental state. Once you get to enlightenment, you will never experience any anger, sadness, frustration, any of those discontent feelings that I talk about. The irritation, the annoyance, the stress, the anxiety, the guilt, the shame, the fear, the loneliness and boredom, the shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing it. Namely, an individual has freed their mind of something called craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a high-level way of understanding what's going on in the unenlightened mind. And I'm going to be teaching you this on Wednesday morning. I'm going to be explaining to you what these three things are so that you can see that your mind has these three things, because I'm going to be explaining to you the symptoms of craving, anger, and ignorance and what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And even though up to Wednesday I won't know your life in detail, you'll be able to see that I'll be able to describe the things that you experience on a day-to-day basis, because I understand your mind has these three poisons, and I can explain to you what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. You'll be able to independently verify it for yourself. So what you're doing is you're purifying the mind of these pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance, getting to the point where you're practicing the wholesome qualities of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So while enlightenment itself is a mental state, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind, where you're purifying the mind of these pollutants that the Buddha discovered, that you're eliminating conditions that are keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. He essentially discovered these 10 individual pollutions, which I'm going to introduce you to here in a moment. We refer to them as the 10 fetters. But when we talk about them from a high level, we talk about them as craving, anger, and ignorance. So the path to enlightenment is this purification of the mind, this cleaning up of the mind. Like right now, you might have been taught in your life to clean this body, right? We learned this growing up. We take showers, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, we do these different things, we clean our ears. This is things that we learn growing up. If you didn't learn how to clean up your mind, then you haven't addressed this full being. You're only addressing the physical body. You're not addressing the mind. And this is why you continue to experience the anger and the frustration and all these other discontent feelings over and over, because the mind hasn't been cleaned up. It's not purified. But by the time you purify the mind, you can get to the point where you're not experiencing these difficulties and struggles and these discontent feelings over and over and over again. Sometimes people refer to enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. I don't refer to it this way, even though there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state. What you're familiar with now is you're familiar with what's called conditional happiness, that you get happy based on some condition. That if it's sunny outside, you might get happy. Or if your bank account balance is here, you might get happy. Or if something happens in your life, you might get happy because of that thing. Maybe you got a raise at work, or you got a new job, or a new boyfriend, girlfriend. You get happy because of this thing. That's called conditional happiness. And that happiness, it arises, it changes, and it fades away. It's temporary. And ultimately, the mind's going to end up in sadness or frustration at some point. So sometimes people are experiencing conditional happiness, and they think that the goal in life is to get to this happiness. Well, by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be experiencing unconditional happiness or unconditioned joy, where the mind is just always joyful, not based on any condition. If you get happy because of something, then that means when that thing no longer exists, you'll be sad or frustrated or irritated. So if you get happy when it's sunny outside, that means when it rains, you'll get frustrated. Or if you get happy because your bank account balance is here, when that changes and your bank account balance is here, you'll get frustrated or irritated or annoyed. So there's some people that have made their way to what's called the jhanas. These are preliminary phases that the mind experiences on its way to enlightenment. And there's these enhanced qualities of mind that are experienced when you're experiencing the jhanas. And there's a lot of bliss. There's a lot of happiness. There's a lot of still conditional excitement in the jhanas. And some people think that they're actually enlightened when they're experiencing the jhanas. So they will explain what they're experiencing as enlightenment. So if you ever hear somebody say that enlightened beings still get angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed, you know that this isn't enlightenment, because enlightened beings don't experience that. So individuals who are experiencing these enhanced qualities of mind that think they're enlightened, but they're actually experiencing the jhanas, they're still getting frustrated and irritated or annoyed, but they think they're enlightened. So they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. So they will typically describe enlightenment as this ultimate bliss or this ultimate happiness. But in my opinion, this is misleading, because the happiness that you think about now is not the same happiness that you're experiencing in enlightenment. You're beyond those conditional experiences. That if you can only be happy because of something, then that thing can't happen all the time. So therefore you can't be happy all the time. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will be happy all the time. The mind's joyful and bright and uplifted, but it's not this conditional happiness that you're experiencing and that you have experienced now. So I don't describe the enlightened mental state as this ultimate bliss, because it's really describing the jhanas, not enlightenment itself. Some of the advantages of enlightenment is that the mind will be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. That the mind will have a high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Because you've been cleaning up the mind has been purified. It's now performing optimally. When you have these pollutions in the mind, it doesn't perform optimally. So that's why the mind doesn't experience the focus and concentration and clarity and deep memory. If you have difficulties remembering things, this is because of the pollutions that are in the mind. But when you uproot that and you purify the mind, you can be focused and clear and concentrated at all times. And you'll notice these peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness and joy. And that's always in the mind. It's always present. You'll notice that you're no longer experiencing any of these feelings. I talk about this. You'll hear me describe this over and over and over again. So you'll get very familiar with this list, that the mind doesn't experience any of these feelings. All the sadness, anger, frustration, and all these other feelings, the mind is uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing it. The mind will have deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment and the natural laws of existence. You'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all beings, where you might find that to be challenging right now. If somebody does things the way you want them to do it, you probably can treat them polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. But if people do things opposite of the way that you want them to do it, you probably have difficulties treating them polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. You might be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful to those people. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be able to maintain your politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect in all situations. It doesn't matter what's going on in your day-to-day life. You can be respectful to everybody. But that's something your mind needs to be trained how to do. You're not going to be causing any harm in the world, harm to other beings. You're not going to be doing that by the time you get to enlightenment. And you'll understand what that means, like causing harm to their material possessions, to their physical body, to their reputation, things like this. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships will be conducted with ease, that they'll really be blossoming. Because when you're bitter or harsh and hostile in your relationships, and you put that out, that's what's going to come back to you. So as long as you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile, you're going to experience that coming back to you. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not being bitter, harsh, and hostile any longer. You're being polite, kind, friendly, respectful in all situations. And because of this, your personal and professional relationships really clear out. That you'll notice that you're able to conduct your relationships with harmony, that the relationships will be harmonious, right? That you'll be able to get along with everybody and anybody. But this is, again, something that you need to train your mind to be able to do. Right now, with these pollutions in the mind, you would find this quite challenging. These are the teachings that you would need to get started on the path to enlightenment as foundational teachings. And I'm going to essentially be teaching you all of these things in this particular course. You would need to learn the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts. I'm going to be teaching you all those things to get you started. Then you're going to need to learn the Brahma Viharas. This is something I'm going to expose you to in this course, but I'm not going to teach it to you. But it's in the first book. It's in chapter 14. Then you're going to need to learn the 10 fetters. I'm going to introduce you to these here in a moment, but you're not going to have the level of depth that you need, but ultimately you're going to need to get more and more depth on this, which all the various courses and retreats that we have will be able to help you get that. But when you're first getting started, you just get introduced to these. Then you're going to need to know the 7 factors of enlightenment and have extensive meditation training. So this is like the core fundamental teachings. There's more beyond this, but this is what you're just getting started with. And as I've shared with you, you're not believing any of these teachings. You're learning them, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and you're practicing them in order to cultivate wisdom about these teachings. So this is how you get to enlightenment, through learning and practicing these core central teachings. In terms of the fetters, what I was just kind of mentioning, this is the underlying thing that the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate as part of getting to enlightenment. This is what you're purifying the mind of, that he discovered these 10 individual pollutions in the mind, and then he gave you the tools and techniques of how to eliminate them from the mind. And he referred to them as fetters because during his lifetime, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. This was a shackle and a chain and a ball, and they would basically keep you in an open field, and you would basically be confined to that area. Where today we put people in prison cells or in jail cells, right? So when he discovered these 10 pollutions, he referred to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state. It's like this shackle and this chain and this ball keeping you trapped in this continuous anger and frustration and irritation over and over and over again. But when you purify the mind of the 10 fetters, that's where the mind becomes peaceful and joyful more and more. You'll gradually see the mind experiencing this. It's not like one day you're unenlightened and the next day you're enlightened, but as you're gradually diminishing and degrading and eliminating these fetters, you're going to gradually see the qualities of enlightenment starting to shine through in the mind more and more. So I'm going to introduce you to some of these fetters so that you can understand what they are. And then we're actually going to focus on the core central teachings in this class. But everything that I'm teaching you in this course and everything on the journey to enlightenment, in one way or another, is helping you to eliminate these fetters. You might not understand that early on when you're first learning the teachings, but it's helpful for you to understand what these fetters are at an introductory level so that when I'm teaching you things like the Eightfold Path, meditation training, the 5 precepts, and all these other things, that you can see that it's coming back to these fetters. This is the thing that you're purifying the mind of, is these 10 fetters. So let me give you some examples here, like this first one called personal existence view. This is where the mind has confusion and misunderstanding. It has misperception. It thinks that this body is you or this mind is you. The mind is holding on to this personal existence view. It's clinging to the self-image and clinging to the self-identity, thinking that this is who you are. So for example, the mind clinging to this self-image, it wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. So when you go out into a public space and you're socializing, if you spilled some spaghetti sauce or chocolate ice cream on your clothing, you might be embarrassed in that situation. The reason why that embarrassment is coming into your mind is because you're clinging to this self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived, you feel happy, you feel good. But then when you spill the chocolate ice cream on your clothing, you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, and now the mind experiences embarrassment. Or say you have a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple, or maybe a gray hair, or maybe you're starting to lose your hair, or maybe you get a little extra fat here or there. You might feel certain way about that, right? You might not feel so comfortable. You might go to the mirror and see that pimple and you're like, oh my goodness, a pimple, right? Or you might have been like me when I was a teenager. I had the mousse and the gel in the mirror trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And I couldn't go outside to catch the bus to go to school unless every little hair was in the right spot, because I wanted those people on the bus to be able to look at me in a certain way. And sometimes I missed the bus because I was in the mirror for so long trying to do the hair, right? So these are things that the mind does when it has personal existence view. It wants to be perceived by others in a certain way, and it can only feel comfortable if it's being perceived that way. So you might go to your closet in the morning and you might think about, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to appear? And you might think about, what's that special shirt or that special pair of pants or that special jewelry that I want to wear in order for these people that I'm going to be spending time with to perceive me in a certain way. You might put on clothes, look in the mirror, and you're like, no, that doesn't look good. Let me change. And you put on a different set of clothes and you look in the mirror. This is the mind's personal existence view. It's clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are and wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be comfortable if you're being perceived that way. And if you're not being perceived that way, you'll feel frustrated or agitated or annoyed. And then the mind can cling to a self-identity, like your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. You can cling to these things thinking that this is who you are. So for example, if you've been in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you identify with I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, or I am a husband, or I am a wife. Now when you're together, you feel whole, you feel good. But when you're separated and you're now single, your mind doesn't identify as I am single. So now you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because the mind thinks that this is the way to solve this problem, this uncomfortableness that the mind's experiencing because I am now single, but the mind identifies with I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. The mind thinks the way to solve this uncomfortableness is to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. Or say you were in a job or occupation, like I am a police officer, or I am a lawyer, or I am a doctor. Well, now, say you're a police officer, you need to retire, maybe you get hurt or injured, you get fired, you can't do that job anymore. Maybe now you're a taxi driver, and that's what you're choosing to do. But your mind is identifying with I am a police officer, and now you really struggle driving that taxi each day. You feel uncomfortable because your mind's not doing what you want to be doing. Or say that you identify with I am American, or I am a Brit, or I'm an Aussie, or I'm Lithuanian, or I am this, or I am that, right? There's this I am, like I am French, I am German. If the mind's clinging to this as your identity, and somebody says very positive and kind things about your identity, like say like all Chinese people are loving and kind and warm and gentle. Wow, well, I am Chinese, so wow, they're talking about me. You feel really great, and that's your identity in your mind. But now it's only a matter of time before somebody says something negative and degrading and disparaging about people that come from your country. And if you experience that, now you'll be angry, you'll be frustrated, you'll be agitated because they're talking about me. Well, in reality, I am not American. I can understand that this body was born on a land that we refer to as America, but the mind doesn't have to adopt the identity of I am American. Right? This is just a land. This is just dirt that this body was born on. And I don't have to adopt that as an identity. But all throughout our life, we've been taught to adopt this identity. We have national anthems, we have flags, we have sports teams that people cheer for. And we start to identify with this as who we are. Right? So what the Buddha is teaching you is to eliminate this from the mind, where you don't cling to the body or the mind or the self-image or the self-identity, is thinking that this is who you are. Because as soon as you cling to it, then it's going to change, and now you're going to struggle and have difficulties. So there's a way to uproot this and eliminate it out of the mind so that you don't cling to it. So now if somebody says, wow, you're so handsome, you're so beautiful, wow, that shirt really brings out the color of your eyes. Okay, that's their opinion. And you might thank them for their kind words, but you don't have to get all excited about that. So that then when someone comes along and says, wow, did you really get your hair cut? Like, that looks so horrible on you. Where did you get your hair cut? Right? Or they say something negative or degrading about the way this body looks, it won't affect you. You have no discontent feelings, no frustration, no agitation whatsoever. So you can get to the point where your mind can be completely peaceful and joyful, whether somebody says something positive or whether somebody says something negative about this body or about this mind. You can be completely content and peaceful. But as long as this personal existence view is in there, you're not going to be able to experience peace and joy. It's just a matter of time before somebody says something negative and degrading about this body and you're frustrated or you're irritated or annoyed. So you can uproot this out of the mind. And you'll learn more about that tomorrow. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and their ability to be able to attain enlightenment. It's very common for people to have doubt when you come to the path to enlightenment, where you might doubt whether this person even lived or not. You might doubt whether his teachings can actually lead to this enlightened mental state. You might doubt whether this enlightened mental state even exists. You might doubt whether this community of people can actually help you to be able to get to enlightenment. You might doubt me and whether I have the ability to help you get to enlightenment. Or you might doubt your own ability to actually get to enlightenment. So doubt is very normal. But the way that you eliminate this doubt is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way you eliminate your doubt about the teachings is you investigate the teachings. You examine them and investigate them. And as you do so, you're reflecting to independently verify them. And then you're practicing them, integrating them into your life. And more, when you see the condition of your mind improving, you'll get to the point where eventually you'll have no doubt because you will have seen significant improvement to the condition of your mind. Because you know in situations where you're angry and frustrated and irritated and you're not experiencing that anymore, you'll know that it's from these teachings. And you'll eventually get to the point where you have no doubt that these teachings are working. You won't be enlightened yet, but you'll get to the point where you have no doubt that they're actually working. You have no doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment because you're making your way to enlightenment. So if you have doubt about the teachings right now, it's very normal. I had a lot of doubt when I came to the path to enlightenment. But what you can do is you can harness this doubt. You can actually turn it into an inquisitive mind. You can say to yourself, yeah, I do doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know whether they work or not because you haven't learned them yet. You don't even know what they are. You haven't had an ability to work with them yet. So now sink your teeth in and really investigate the teachings and really examine them. And as you dig into them, you're going to see how truthful they are. And when you implement them in your life, you're going to see how they improve the condition of your mind. And this is what's going to lead to you eliminating your doubt. So doubt is one of the things that will hinder you from getting to enlightenment. Because if you doubt something, then why would you ever take time, effort, and energy to be able to learn and grow and develop? So slowly but surely, you can erode this doubt by investigating the teachings, examining them. That's what's going to get rid of the doubt. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. What this is what wrong behavior is there's certain moral conduct that you have right now that is causing difficulties in your life, that you might be bitter and harsh and hostile to the people around you. And when you're talking that way to people, it's damaging your relationships. And as you damage your relationships, that's all coming back to you. So if you have a life partner, if you have your parents, your brothers and sisters, and you're being bitter and harsh and hostile to them, those people are going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to you too. So as long as you're putting out this behavior or this moral conduct that is unwise, it's going to keep coming back to you, where people are going to be bitter and harsh and hostile to you over and over and over again. It's kind of like the pipe has bursted and there's oil spewing all over the world. And what the Buddha is teaching you is how to shut that down so that you don't keep spewing oil all over the world. So if you're out there being bitter, harsh, and hostile and aggressive with people, that's all just going to come back to you. You're making this big mess. So the Buddha teaches you how to clean this up so that you can get to a point where you're not being bitter, harsh, and hostile with others. And as you do that, you'll notice that these relationships improve, where people aren't going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile with you. So if you can build up your moral conduct where you're being loving and kind and warm and gentle with mom and dad and brothers and sisters for an extended period of time, more and more, you'll see that those relationships will improve and that you're not experiencing any bitterness and hostility coming back from them because you're not putting it out. But as long as you're putting it out, it's going to be coming back to you. So in order to get rid of this portion of this fetter, you're going to need to clean up certain moral conduct that you have right now. But the Buddha is going to give you guidance on this in a way that you can independently verify what would be wise and what would be unwise. It's not rules or commandments. He's just helping you to be able to see the natural laws of how to interact with other beings in a more loving and more kind and more gentle way. The part where he talks about wrong observances, what this is that if you think that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to lead to improvement in your life and in your mind, then this is the wrong observances. Like if we think that it's rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that is going to improve our life, then we have wrong observances, that we aren't understanding what the real problem is. The real problem that the Buddha discovered is that the mind has a lack of wisdom, that it has this lack of wisdom or this unknowing of true reality, this misunderstanding. And the way to get rid of this is to be able to cultivate wisdom. That's why I started off this morning with saying the journey to enlightenment is to cultivate wisdom. You won't see me doing any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship, because none of that leads to cultivation of wisdom. If you would like to improve your life, you're going to need to cultivate wisdom. You're going to need to make different decisions than you're making now, and that's going to lead to different results. Whereas if you keep doing the same things that you have been doing in your life, you're just going to keep experiencing the same results. But when you cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and experience different results, now your life can gradually improve. But if you thought that it was rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that was going to improve your life, then that means you're not cultivating wisdom to be able to improve your life. So by the time you get to the elimination of this part of the fetter, your mind will understand that it's not rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that is going to improve your life. Now, whether you do those things or not, it's up to you, right? But at least you need to get to the point where your mind knows that these things aren't what's leading to enlightenment. So maybe you're going home to spend time with your family, and maybe you guys are going to church or the synagogue or the mosque or some other place like a temple, and maybe they're going to be doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship there, and maybe you decide to go because you're hanging out with the family. You guys are going to go out to some performance or a dinner or something like this afterwards. Sure, go have fun, enjoy your family, but at least in your mind, you're going to know that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that are being done, it's not leading to wisdom, and it's not going to improve your life. It's not going to improve the condition of your mind. So some students, before they ever study with me, they've already eliminated the wrong observances. And this is one of the reasons why they come to study with me, because they know that I don't do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But you'll see these things in different places. If you go with me on the tour on Friday, you're going to see some of the places we go that are actually Buddhist temples. They're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And that's because they're not practicing the original teachings of the Buddha. Not every single temple is learning and practicing the original teachings. There's been changes and modifications that people have made over the years that isn't what the Buddha actually taught. And you'll see rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, even by people who consider themselves to be ordained Buddhist monks. They're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But in those situations, you would know that these people aren't enlightened, because it's not rite, rituals, ceremonies, and worships that's going to lead to an improvement to your mind or your life. And you'll need to be able to see this for yourself through the gradual training of the mind and the gradual improvement of the mind. You'll be able to see that it's wisdom that's leading to an improved mind and an improved life. Central desire and ill will are two things that you're going to learn a lot about. Central desire is where the mind is longing, yearning through your sense bases, wanting things to be permanently agreeable. Your sense bases are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. The mind is longing, yearning through these, wanting permanently agreeable contact. So if you see something that is agreeable to you, you'll get pleasant feelings. But if you see something that is disagreeable to you, you'll get painful feelings. And the same thing is happening through all the other sense bases, like the ears. If you're at a stoplight and somebody pulls up to you with some music that you like, you're like, all right, that's my jam. All right, yeah, let's party. All right, dancing in your seat, feeling all great. But then you pull up to the next stoplight, and somebody has some music that you don't like. You despise this music. And now you get frustrated. You get irritated. You get annoyed, right? And you might think that it's that other person that's causing your frustration, but it's not. It's your central desire. Your mind is wanting permanently agreeable contact through your sense bases, and you see this music as disagreeable to you, and now you're frustrated about that music. But this is an impermanent situation. You're not going to be able to be in a permanent situation where everything is agreeable to you. It's just not possible because of the way the world's constructed. And when you have this central desire, again, if you're getting what you want, you get pleasant feelings. But if you don't get what you want, one of the things that can occur is your ill will can arise. This is your bitterness, your harshness, your hostility, where you're aggressive and hostile and bitter, maybe through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. This is almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. It's like, right? You're trying to fear this other being into doing things your way. Because the mind has these central desires that it's trying to get fulfilled. And the mind thinks, if I can just scare this being, if I can be bitter and harsh and hostile to them, they'll do things my way. It's like a lion growling and roaring, trying to get this other lion to do things your way. So with the ill will arising, you will become unskillful through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now you're going to damage your relationships, and you'll experience broken relationships over and over and over again. But it's coming from the central desire, and then the ill will is starting to arise because the mind's not getting what it wants. I'm going to skip over these two and talk about conceit for a moment. Conceit is what we refer to as the ego. The personal existence view and conceit. What conceit is like the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, the judging other people, looking down at people or looking up to people. This is the boastfulness, thinking that you're superior to other people or inferior to other people. And this is just as dangerous, putting yourself above people as putting yourself below people. So now if you have conceit in your mind, you might be judging other people and looking down on them and talking to them in a degrading and diminishing way. But if you have conceit, you're probably also looking up to people, like maybe a boss or something like this. You go into their office and you're all shaken up and you're nervous because you feel like you're below this person. When in reality, if you get rid of this conceit, you won't have that. Where this conceit is coming from is in our animal existences. We needed conceit. If we didn't have conceit, we wouldn't have been able to survive. We needed to know in our animal existences, what is the pecking order? We needed to know who's above us and who's below us. Because when we were wolves in a wolf pack, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're teaching us how to hunt and how to survive. When we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because she's going to show us where the migration paths are, where the watering holes are, where the food is. If we didn't know who was above us in the elephant herd, we would have been lost and confused. We wouldn't have been able to survive. But when we come into this human world, this mind still has this conceit where it's measuring and comparing. It's putting people above you or below you. And you don't need this because it's going to motivate unskillful conduct. Because in some cases, you're going to be talking down to people. In other cases, you're going to be talking up to people. You're going to be nervous and shaken up. And this isn't going to promote harmonious relationships. So you need to get to the point where you just see everybody as equal, that you don't have this pecking order. So even though other people might have that in their mind, you need to get to the point where you don't have that. So like the king of Thailand versus someone who's sweeping the streets out on the sidewalk, these people are equal. The king of Thailand has a certain role in Thailand that they're performing, but this person who's sweeping the streets, they have a certain role too, and they're just as important. We like to have clean streets, right? So we can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to all these people, right? We don't have to treat the king like super great and treat the person who's sweeping the streets as they're below us. Instead, we can just treat everybody with love and kindness and respect, right? So what you would like to be able to do is get to the point where you don't see yourself as being above people or below people, and now you can be more harmonious in all your relationships. Where all of this is coming from is called ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. The mind just lacks wisdom. It doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. The mind lacks wisdom of things like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the natural law of karma. The mind lacks wisdom about the way the world's truly constructed in these natural laws. And because of this lack of wisdom, it continues to stay stuck over and over and over again. So this fetter of ignorance is where the mind just has misunderstanding and confusion or misperception. And the way you eradicate that is through cultivation of wisdom. And that's why rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't work to get to enlightenment. You need to be able to cultivate wisdom. So by you cultivating wisdom, you eradicate the ignorance. And that's why the Buddhist teachings, they're not based in belief, because belief, you don't know what's true or false. You need to be able to get to wisdom. And the way you get to wisdom is by learning, examining, and investigating teachings, reflecting on them to independently verify them, and practice them, integrate them into your life. And then you'll be able to see how these teachings are improving your life and impacting your life in a positive way. So do you guys have any questions so far on anything I've been sharing? No questions here? So I don't teach all of these when I'm here, just kind of introducing them to you in this foundational class. But there's retreats where I actually spend an entire hour to an hour and a half on each individual fetter. And that's later when you develop your mind further. But for right now, I just introduce you to these. But later, as you journey on the path to enlightenment, you're going to need to know these in more detail. What I do in those retreats is I spend an hour, hour and a half on each fetter. I explain to you what it is. I explain to you the symptoms of it. I explain to you how to eliminate it. And I explain to you how to know that you've actually eliminated it. But you wouldn't be able to eliminate these unless you get the core fundamental teachings under your belt first. So that's what we're going to be focusing on here. But just understand everything that you learn is coming back to this in one way or another. It's helping you to eliminate this. This is what you're working to purify. And I've just kind of introduced these to you in a way that you can see that your mind actually has these. When an individual is eliminating these, slowly but surely, an individual is making their way through the 4 stages of enlightenment. There's 4 individual stages that the mind goes through. There's something called stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. Today, we refer to them as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, he referred to them in this way. And he referred to them this way for a reason. Because, for example, when you get into that 1st stage of enlightenment, it's called a stream enterer, because if you get to the 1st stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or a future life, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. So just like a log enters the stream, it's going to eventually get to the ocean. It's the same thing, that once you get to the 1st stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. That's why they call it a stream enter. You've entered into the stream. The once returner is referred to that way because once you get to that 2nd stage of enlightenment, if you die in that stage, you're going to come back to this world one more time in the human realm, and you will get to enlightenment in that very next life. So some of you guys might have actually been a once returner in your past life. You don't necessarily know that right now, but potentially you were, and now this is your opportunity to get to enlightenment. If you die in the 3rd stage of enlightenment, it's called non-returner because that individual is reborn into the heavenly world, and from there they will get to enlightenment. An arahant, this is an individual who's fully purified their mind and they're experiencing enlightenment. That is an enlightened being. When you get to the 4th stage of enlightenment, you fully eliminated all the 10 fetters, and now this individual is experiencing enlightenment. If they die, they're not going to be reborn back into the world at all. The Buddha leaves it as an undeclared teaching of what happens once you get to enlightenment and die. He doesn't talk about an afterlife because it's not about getting to an afterlife. It's about getting to peace and joy now in this life. It's not about longing, yearning for what may or may not happen next. It's about getting to peace and joy now in this particular life. So there's these 4 stages of enlightenment. And as you're eliminating the various fetters, you're going to be moving through these 4 stages of enlightenment. And then there's something called a Buddha, which isn't a stage of enlightenment, but it's a person who's trained their mind in a unique way. And I'm going to explain to you what that is here in a moment. But just in focusing on these 4 stages of enlightenment, when you eliminate these first 3 fetters, this is how it gets you into the 1st stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer. When you've already eliminated the first 3 fetters and you just thin out number 4 and 5, they're still there, but they've kind of been thinned out. This is when the mind is moving into the 2nd stage of enlightenment as a once returner. When you've eliminated the 5 lower fetters, this is where the mind moves into this stage of enlightenment as a non-returner. And when you eliminate all 10 fetters, this is where the mind is now actually enlightened, or we might say this is an arahant. But this isn't something that you're going to call up mom and say, hey, mom, guess what? I'm an arahant. Aren't you proud of me? Right? Because that would be the ego being boastful and arrogant, right? You're not going to put it on your Facebook page like, hey, everybody, I'm a stream enterer. Look at me. Look how great I am. I'm a stream enterer, right? This isn't what you're using. This is like a personal development plan. This is helping you to be able to see how to develop as an individual. You might talk to your teacher about these things, where you might say, hey, I think I'm a stream enterer. Can you help me to determine this? These are things you might talk with me about, but you wouldn't talk with like just people at large, right? You wouldn't be like, oh, by the way, I'm a once returner. Look at me. Aren't I so great, right? That would be arrogance and pride and boastfulness. And that's not what you're interested in. That would hinder you from being able to make your way to enlightenment. That would be the conceit that would be coming through. So these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. And as you're making your way through these 4 stages, your discontentedness is gradually diminishing. When you get to the first stage of enlightenment, the discontentedness that you once experienced when you were off the path to enlightenment, it's a mere fraction of that. So you would have seen the cleaning up of the mind in a pretty significant way, even to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And you're still getting discontent, but it's minimal compared to what you once experienced in the past. And as you gradually make your way through these 4 stages, you're going to see a gradual improvement to the condition of the mind. So for example, when you're in the 3rd stage of enlightenment, you might be getting discontent like once every 3 months. And it's very minimal and very insignificant when it occurs. It might last for like 5 seconds or 10 seconds. You just get a little bit irritated, a little bit annoyed. And people around you, they might not even know that you're frustrated or irritated internally. It's just inside your own mind. So about once every 3 months, once every 6 months, you'll experience that in that 3rd stage of enlightenment. But by the time you get to enlightenment as an arahant, there's no discontentedness at all. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You haven't had any frustration, any irritation, any annoyance, or anything like that that has been in the mind. That the mind's been completely purified. The mind is free. It's liberated. Like right now, your mind is attached. Right? It's holding on. That maybe if your mom dies or your brother or sister dies, you'd be frustrated or you'd be angry or irritated or some other discontent feeling. You might be grieving or sorrowful. And it's not your love that's causing that. It's actually the mind holding on and craving for this person to be permanent, when in reality, they're not permanent. By the time you get to enlightenment, even if your mom died, you could still maintain your peace and you can maintain your joy. You're not joyful because your mom died. You're joyful despite that she's died. Even though she's died, you can maintain your joy. You can maintain your peace within your own mind. Right now, that might be pretty challenging for you to be able to experience that. But that's what an enlightened being can experience. That you're not getting the grief and the sorrow and the sadness because you love your mom or you care about your mom. You're having that because the mind is attached. It's not free. It's not liberated. But by the time you get rid of these pollutions, the mind is free. It's liberated. That you're no longer experiencing the mind going up and down and up and down. The mind is peaceful and joyful permanently. So these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. Okay. Now there's an individual called a Buddha. This is someone we refer to as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. A Buddha is an individual who gets to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment. So a Buddha is an arahant, but they've done it in a unique way, that they don't have any teachers or any guides. But then there's other criteria too, that they have a profound memory. They're able to recall countless details about their current life and their past lives too. This is what makes them able to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves. Where for you, you have like a limited capacity in your mind. It's like a hard drive. You maybe have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, right? And now as you experience things in your day-to-day life, you have to delete old files in order to store new files because you have a limited capacity. This is why, like in the last 5 years or so, you probably generally remember the things that you've been involved in and what you've been doing. But if you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories. You don't have direct recall of all the things that were happening during your childhood. But an individual who's going to become a Buddha, their mind doesn't function like that. Their mind has an unlimited capacity to remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. And they accumulate all this wisdom to now put it together in their last life to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's how they actually do it, because they have a profound and deep memory. They have an unlimited capacity in their mind. then an individual who's a Buddha, they can quickly determine the condition of someone's mind just by spending time with them. And now they're able to help that individual with teachings that are going to help them to be able to make their way to enlightenment. A Buddha doesn't give advice in an unsolicited way. They're going to have students that are learning from them. And as those students are asking them questions and getting help, the Buddha would be able to see the quality of their mind and be able to provide them teachings that is going to help them. But it's up to each individual student to ask for help. But a Buddha could easily observe the condition of their student's mind and then be able to help them get to enlightenment. This is one of the reasons why a Buddha can help countless people get to enlightenment during their lifetime, because they can observe the quality of their students' minds and then help them as they ask for help and solicit guidance. And then lastly, an individual who's a Buddha, they're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, that's what they practice as well. So if a Buddha teaches to be loving and kind and warm and gentle, that's what they're also going to be practicing. So it's not like they're teaching one thing and doing something opposite of that, because a Buddha understands that they're teaching just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions, that their students are learning through their actions. So a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings so that their students can observe and learn through their actual actions. So this is the criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. And we refer to this individual as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because this individual, by the time they get to enlightenment, they know the path inside and out, backwards and forwards. Where like an average student who's learning from a teacher, they're going to have maybe gotten to enlightenment, where 80, maybe 90% of what they've learned led to their enlightenment. But maybe there's 10 or 20% of the things that they're doing that didn't actually lead to their enlightenment, but they're still doing those things. So they're kind of got a little bit extra baggage around. So they're not fully, perfectly enlightened. But an individual who gets to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides, if they're actually practicing a certain meditation and it works to improve the condition of their mind, a Buddha knows this is what's going to lead to enlightenment. But if a Buddha is practicing a certain meditation and it's not helping to improve the condition of their mind, they will discard it because they don't have any teachers or any guides. They're not just going to keep that meditation around because their teacher told them to do it. They're going to discard that meditation so that by the time they get to enlightenment, they know the path inside and out, backwards and forwards. They don't have any extra baggage around. So that's why we refer to a Buddha as fully, perfectly enlightened. And now what they're going to do for the rest of their life is they're going to lay down lights along the side of the path to illuminate it and make it very clear for others how to get to this enlightened mental state. So this is what a Buddha is. Do you guys have any questions on any of these things? This class doesn't have very many questions, no? Okay. All right. So now I'll share with you what enlightenment is not. This is one of the ways that I actually teach, is I share with you what something is, and then I share with you what something isn't. And by sharing something that this isn't, it actually helps you to understand what it is, okay? So what enlightenment is not, and the way that you'll know that your mind is not enlightened, is that your mind will still be experiencing discontentedness. You'll be experiencing conditional feelings. Here, you notice that an unenlightened being is going to be experiencing conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. These are all conditioned feelings: happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. That's based on some condition. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're going to be plenty happy. And the happiness that you experience in enlightenment is way beyond the happiness you ever experienced in the unenlightened state. That you're now experiencing unconditioned joy and happiness, where the mind is always joyful. But here, this is conditional happiness that is temporary. And because of that, it's essentially displeasing because it arises, it changes, and it fades away. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you will have eliminated all these conditioned feelings and others as well. If you have a craving to tell other people that you are enlightened, you'll know that you're not enlightened. So if you're ever somewhere and somebody like strolls up to you and says, "By the way, I'm enlightened," right away you know they're not enlightened because they're being boastful, they're being arrogant, they're being prideful, right? If you're enlightened and your mind is so peaceful and joyful, Just go be peaceful and joyful. Why do you have to come around here and tell us that you're actually enlightened? What do you want from me? Do you want me to admire you? Do you want some kind of gratification? If you're wanting to be admired, you're not enlightened yet, right? If your mind is peaceful and joyful, you're completely fulfilled. You're completely satisfied inwardly. You don't need to go around and boast and be arrogant and prideful to get other people to think that you're enlightened. So if you go around and you tell people that you are enlightened, you know that you're actually not enlightened. So if you ever run into somebody that says, by the way, I'm enlightened, no, they're not enlightened, right? And you don't need to tell them that necessarily, but just know for yourself that this person isn't enlightened, because enlightened beings don't go around and bragging that they're enlightened or being boastful about that. If you notice that you have complacency or lack of motivation, initiative, enthusiasm, or a willingness to do something, then you know that you're not enlightened, because the mind will be dull and lethargic. The way that the unenlightened mind works is it chases and chases and chases and chases and chases something. And then if it's not doing that, it'll be all the way on the other side where it'll be dull and lethargic and bored and lonely. So if you're noticing this kind of thing where you're unmotivated and you don't have enthusiasm, you don't have vigor, you don't have ambition, then you know that your mind is unenlightened. Okay, so this is the way to know that the mind is not enlightened. Any questions on this? No? Okay. You have a question? Yeah. Thank you so much for getting the mic. Yeah, there you go. Just takes a second to engage.
Right. A question about motivation. I feel that motivation usually comes from wanting something, and it is like deeply embedded in the neuro pathways and mediated by all sorts of chemicals, like dopamine, for instance. So does that mean that enlightened person or someone who's on a path to enlightenment learns how to suppress that or just ignore these very basic functions in brain? How does that come together?
Yeah, you're not suppressing anything on your way to enlightenment. So you're not suppressing these feelings, or you're not suppressing anything. What you're doing is you're training your mind to be able to have motivation, for example, but base it in wise decision making rather than chasing after pleasant feelings. Because what the mind's going to do in the unenlightened state is it's going to chase after something like more money. And now when you get that more money, you'll feel happy. But when you don't get the more money, you'll feel sad. This is what the unenlightened mind is experiencing. But the enlightened mind can make wise decisions to pursue something as a goal, objective, or interest, and they can be motivated to do it. But it's not based in selfish desires and longing, yearning for those pleasant feelings. So the mind needs to learn how to pursue goals and objectives in life without a longing, yearning, and a craving. So what you're talking about on the chemical side of the brain, that's not what we're talking about. Those things are happening because of what's going on in the mind. The mind and the brain are two different things. The brain is the physical organ. The mind is non-physical. It's intangible. So when the mind has craving and longing and yearning, and the mind gets what it wants, then a scientist might say it's releasing dopamine in the brain. Okay, that's because of what's going on in the mind. But if the mind doesn't have that craving and it's not chasing and longing and yearning after something, and it learns to pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest, I don't know if that dopamine still gets released or not. I don't know what a scientist would say. They need to research that and let us know. But you can learn how to pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest that's not based in selfish desires, but instead wise decision making. And that's where you can be peaceful all the time, because you're just gradually going to make wise decisions towards accomplishing this thing. And you're doing it based in wisdom rather than wanting or expecting something to be a certain way.
So maybe then the definition of motivation is a little bit different in my mind, and maybe to what Buddhism teaches.
It's more about what's causing the motivation. Right now, what you're familiar with is chasing after things through craving, desire, attachment. And that's the motivation that one has, that, man, I really want those pleasant feelings, or I really want that more money, or I want that boyfriend or girlfriend, or I want that new house or that new car. Well, what you need to be able to do is not do that, because that longing, yearning is going to produce discontent feelings, because you can only be happy when you get what you want. And when you don't get what you want, you feel sad. You can't be on this other side, which is what I'm talking about here, which is the complacency, the dullness, the lethargic condition. That's not going to be peaceful and joyful there either. So you need to come to the middle, where you pursue things in wise decisions. Like, hey, I need a house. I need a shelter to live within, and let me see what I can do and what kind of shelter I can get. I need some clothing, and I need to have some food, and I need to have these things. So let me pursue these things as a goal, as an objective, but not base my inner feelings on whether I get it or not. You can maintain your happiness, and you can maintain your motivation and your ambition through wise decisions to pursue what it is that you're looking to accomplish in the world, but you're not basing your feelings on whether you get that thing or not. This is something that the mind needs to learn how to do. This is the middle way, where chasing after something, you're on one side, being dull and lethargic, you're on the other side. But there's this middle way where you can pursue things through wise decision making. And the mind doesn't know how to do this in the unenlightened state. And that's part of the journey to enlightenment, is to learn how to do this. So you can learn how to be motivated based on wise decisions. So, for example, I'm very motivated to share these teachings with you. When I come to the temple, I drive from my house 20 minutes away. I'm driving the whole time with a smile on my face, interested to get here and share teachings with you. In some cases, it's raining and pouring, and I'm getting wet all the way here, right? And I'm just like, wow, this is going to be great getting to the temple. Well, if I get here and there's one student, I'm just as content and peaceful as if there's 100. Right? Sometimes when people come, they might have an expectation like, wow, I expected there to be 30 people here or 50 people here. Well, if I had that expectation in my mind, if I had that want, I could only be happy if there's 30 people here, right? But also, if I was over here on the other side, where I was like, I don't care how many people are there, I'm just going to show up and see what happens. No, I'm in the middle, where I'm practicing. I put advertisements out on Facebook. I have a website, YouTube videos, different things. People learn about these teachings, and I'm interested and I'm motivated to come here and share these teachings with you, but I don't have a longing and yearning for it. So I taught a retreat about a week ago where there was about 50 people here every single day. And this was a particular retreat that I only teach once a year. So there were people flying in from all over the place coming to learn. And now I'm teaching this course where I don't know how many people are here. I haven't even counted. So 9 people are here right now. Completely different number. Whereas if I had an expectation or a want, I wouldn't be motivated. I'd be like, there's only 9 people here. I don't feel like teaching 9 people. Or if one person was here, right? Like, I don't feel like teaching one person. I'm going to cancel the class because there's no motivation there, right? So you can get to the point where you have an interest, you have a goal, you're making wise decisions towards accomplishing something, but you're not forming feelings on what is or isn't occurring. And this is just something the mind needs to learn how to do. Any other questions? Yes, sir. If you could get a mic, that way people online will be able to hear you.
Hello, everyone. This year I'm 27 years old. I want to travel to everywhere. I want to experience interesting, funny thing. I don't want to marry. I don't want to have children. But my mom wants me to marry, to have the children, to have a family. So I don't know I am right or not.
Sure. So it's not about what's right or wrong necessarily. It's about you making the decisions that's best for your life.
Yes.
Right? Your mom has certain expectations.
Yes.
She has certain cravings. Yes. She thinks that her happiness is going to come from you having a family and having kids. So she's trying to form her happiness on you, right? And she doesn't realize, because of her lack of wisdom, that that's not how she's going to get to happiness, that she's wanting those conditioned pleasant feelings. And you need to be able to understand that You need to lead the life that you would like to live based on your decisions. Your mom is her own individual being, and she gets to make decisions for her life, but she doesn't get to make decisions for your life.
I want to...
Hold on.
Oh.
Hold on. So in order for mom to be happy, she needs to let go of her expectation and her wanting and longing, yearning for you to be a certain way. And she needs to find that happiness internally. But what the unenlightened mind does, because of its lack of wisdom, is it's seeking satisfaction externally. It thinks that if I can get my son to just get married and have kids, I will be happy. And she will. She will get conditioned happiness, and it'll last for a few weeks and maybe a few months. But then that's going to fade away. And now she's going to say, I want you to do this, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do this. It's going to be a never-ending list of things that she wants you to do. And each time she's going to get temporary happiness, and then it's going to fade away. And then she's going to get temporary happiness that's going to fade away. So you need to be able to understand that that's what mom's mind is doing, and you don't need to meet her expectations. Sometimes children think that our goal in life is to meet our family's expectations, but you need to be able to train your own mind to understand that your goal is not to meet your family's expectations, but instead to make wise decisions for your own life that you're going to feel good about. And that's what's going to help you to get to peace and joy. If your mom has an expectation of you, and now you adopt that into your mind, now you have an expectation of yourself. And if you're not meeting that expectation, you'll be frustrated and you'll be annoyed. Right? So the reason why I know this is, and I'm going to explain it to you tomorrow with the Four Noble Truths, but when I was a child growing up, I was about 17 years old. I was spending a lot of time with my guy friends, and my family came to me and they said, you're spending too much time with your guy friends. You should get a girlfriend. And I thought about that for a few months, and I decided to go get a girlfriend. And then I started spending time with my girlfriend, and my family came to me and they said, you're spending too much time with your girlfriend. You need to spend more time with us. I'm like, man, you can't make these people happy, right? So as soon as you meet your family's expectations, they'll be happy for a period of time, but then they're going to change their expectations, right? So at that young age of 17, I made a switch in my mind, and I said, my goal is not to meet my family's expectations. My goal is to create the kind of life that I would like to live, free of everybody else's decisions and what they want for me. And that's what you need to be able to get to so that you can get to peace. And your mom's not going to like it initially, but eventually she's going to let go of her expectations, and she's actually going to get more happy when she lets go of her expectations. But if you feed your mom's expectations where you just keep giving her what she wants, it's like feeding a monster. And this monster is going to just get bigger and bigger, and she's going to keep putting more and more expectations on you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. So you'll learn more about this tomorrow when we study the Four Noble Truths. All right. So this is everything I was going to share with you guys on this topic about what enlightenment is. It's just 5 minutes before 12. This is where we normally take our lunch break. So we're going to take a lunch break and get back together at 1:30. And when we come back at 1:30, I'm going to teach you Buddhist chanting so you can learn what the Buddhist chanting is. I'm going to explain to you the benefits of why we do it. And then I'm going to teach you how to do it. We're going to practice it together. And then we're going to put it all together with a meditation session. So if you guys would like to come back at 1:30, that's where I'll start that. So enjoy your lunch, and you're welcome to use this space all you like. I'm probably going to go get some food and come back and maybe even take a nap or work on the computer or something. You guys are welcome to do anything you like. Use the space as you like, and I'll see you at 1:30. Okay, so thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn, and we'll see you in a bit.